Welcome to the internet layer of the dark lord of optics. All jokes aside, I'm a nerdy guy who writes about guns and works with optics. I strive to provide a thinking man's take on both whenever I can. Alright folks, welcome to the channel of the dark lord of optics. Everybody tells me I need to have a better introduction. I apologize, I don't have a good one. This is the second installment of the Guns of the Dark Lord series. You guys seem to like the first one, so I put it to a vote, and you voted that the second one should also be on another bolt gun. I promise my selection of the bolt gun is not an attempt to shock you, and for those of you who have been following my musings for a little while, this will not be a shock at all. But if I'm forced to pick the guns that I own that I'm most attached to, this guy is definitely in the top 3. Probably not top 1, that would still be the Fix, which is, by the way, right behind me. But this is either 2 or 3, and I couldn't decide. So I chose to start with this one. So what is this? This is a somewhat exotic version of the Mosin gun rifles. I happen to sort of collect Mosin guns, not hugely actively, but I like these guns. They look a little crude, they seem a little crude, but they're more sophisticated than meets the eye, and given how old the design is, the basic Mosin gun design hails from 1891. Both the gun and the cartridge, the rimmed 762x54R cartridge, both the gun and the cartridge are still in use today. It is still a machine gun cartridge for the Russian military. It is still fairly commonly used for hunting and other things. It is still commonly used as a precision cartridge. And the fact that it's still here after all these years says something about the design, despite looking a little bit quirky and having some limitations. Despite looking a little quirky and having some limitations in terms of how the action has been built, there are variants of this basic model that are spectacularly accurate, and this one happens to be one of them. This is the Finnish, made in Finland, model 2876. What is 2876? When I say made in Finland, well, it was built in Finland, but the action itself was built in Russia. Finns were part of the Russian Empire before the Communist Revolution, and they didn't have to make their own guns. They had plenty of Russian Mosin guns sent over to them. And then they fought a war to stay independent from Russia after the Communist Revolution. And during that war, they had some and captured more of the Mosin gun actions and bought a few. And then again, they captured some number of them during the Russian-Finnish War, where they kicked Russian asses quite thoroughly, which is, I think, was interesting, given how small Finland is. But they always used Russian actions, and then they rebuilt. The rest of the triggers are different. The bolt design is the same, but there are some quirks. The extractor is different, or some other things are different. The barrels are definitely different. Model 2876 is based on what was probably the most famous version of the Mosin, Model 2830. I actually have one of those also, which had a slightly heavier barrel than regular Mosin. It's a much higher quality barrel. And the way that barrel shot was really quite impressive. There was some 2876 rifles built on a later Model 39, and you can tell usually rear sight is different and the barrel is slightly thinner. M39 is also spectacularly accurate, but the original Model 28's sort of legendary, right? For Mosin gun enthusiasts like me, they are kind of special. This particular design, 2876, as the name suggests, was built in 1970s for the various military competition shooting, primarily for the 300-meter military competition that was comparatively common in Europe, and that the Finns won with these guns, to the best of my knowledge, more than once. However, I can basically take off this action, take off the target style rear sight and front sight, retain the original front sight base, drop it on regular Mosin gun stock and shoot it. Right? They really didn't do anything terribly exotic beyond adding dual aperture sights. So it's an aperture in the back, an aperture in the front, and beyond adding this biathlon style stock, if you wish. That was enough. Now it is a nice, it's not even properly bedded into the stock. They added a couple of shims here and there. The barrel is perfectly free floated. The stock on the bottom, on the left side facing me, has Anschutz rails. I have a loop sling here. This is the rifle I practice with when I want to shoot looped up. So the way this works, so it is dual aperture sights. The rear sight is adjustable, elevation and windage. It is quite precise and amazingly repeatable, given this is not exactly new, but I messed with it a little bit. Front sight does have an aperture. There are replaceable apertures that are fairly easy to replace. I have a whole set, but I mostly end up using one of the larger ones. The bolt is bent in a fairly interesting way. I believe they use the same rifles for their scoped sniper rifles, and this bolt, the way it is bent so that it can go under the rear sight, but it will also work just fine if you were to put a rifle scope on this. Some of these that were important in the US had a rear base for a rifle scope. Unfortunately, I don't have one of those, and the days when I was going to bobber a collectible rifle are way behind me. I've done that a few times, unfortunately. I'm not going to drill and tap this one. This thing is silly accurate, so the urge to put a scope on it occasionally has been strong. I've even been experimenting with some no drill and tap scope mounts to see if they're sturdy enough to check how accurate this thing really is. But with iron sights, it is clearly more accurate than I am. Not only is it more accurate than I am, which is not that great of a feat, I'm not exactly the world's best shot. The way this gun is set up, it is really, the way this gun is set up, it is really, really easy to shoot well. Everyone I know who has tried this gun found the stock comfortable. I'm 6 foot tall. A friend of mine is about 5'8", 5'9". We both like the stock. We both have one of these guns. It has a little bit of a cast. I'm going to show you. I'm at a shooting range, so I don't want to spin it around where it's pointing the wrong way. But if you look at the stock, there's a very comfortable slope portion here for your face. The stock itself is cast a little bit to the right for right-handed shooters. The grip where the thumb goes and everything is spectacularly comfortable. I'm even considering paying somebody with a stock replicator machine. If you guys have one or know anybody who has one, please let me know. Excuse me. It's not a balance point. If you guys know anyone with a stock replicator machine, I could use a few copies of this stock. It is weirdly comfortable. Okay. The gun, this is my general practice when shooting looped up. I'm not that good with it anyway, and I figured an iron sight rifle would be a good exercise for it. But also, this is the gun that I used to take back when I lived in Los Angeles. There are a lot of people in LA with a lot of money and not a lot of shooting experience. So it was not uncommon to find some guy at the range with the Accuracy International and the Schmidt & Bender scope, not knowing from which side to approach this thing and all that. But they have the fanciest rifle and they would look down on everyone. So for shits and giggles, every once in a while, I would go set up next to one of those with this gun, which is kind of beat up and it looks old and doesn't have optics. And it doesn't really look like anything special unless you know what you're looking at. I would set up next to one of those guys, figure out what distance he's shooting at, and just shoot groups next to him at the same distance. And I know it's not nice, and I know I shouldn't do this, but it was really enjoyable in many ways to go see their faces. when we walked over to check the targets, right? This gun has never ever let me down. Now, one caveat: most Model 2876 guns have a 308 barrel. Most other Mosins, latest M39, later M39s, Russian 9130s, all the Russian guns have either 310 or 311 bores. So if you shoot a standard 762 by 54 ammunition for one of these guns, you will get excessive pressure signs. You're pushing a .311 bullet or .310 bullet through a .308 bore. It does not sound like a big difference, but you will get some pressure signs. So this is essentially a hand loading only proposition. I shoot 308 bullets through this. It's not particularly picky about bullets, but it seems to shoot cheap 150 grain bullets remarkably well. I got the best results with 168 grain Match Kings. I've taken this gun to 1,000 yards. It has always shot where it is supposed to, and the sight adjusted the way it is supposed to adjust. Honestly, probably the biggest reason I have such a thing for Finnish guns. My grandfather in 1939 was conscripted into the Soviet army. Service was mandatory, and Soviet army was not like an American army. You generally try to avoid it like the plague. And he served in the Winter War when the Soviet Union attacked Finland. He was wounded in that war, got a concussion from some sort of a landmine or something going off not far from him. Got some frostbite. Due to frostbite, lost one toe on his foot. And because of that, he ended up not serving in World War II against the Germans. Not too many Jews who served in the military survived that. So in many ways, the Winter War that almost killed him quite likely saved his life because he did not participate in the much bloodier and much more lethal World War II, and that's how I ended up being here. But I remember his stories of a few months he spent in Finland during winter, and that is probably the original source for why I am so interested in Finnish variants of the Mosin gun, with this guy being easily my favorite. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, please put them up in the comments, and I will put up a poll to see what kind of gun you guys want to see next. Thank you.